You're being asked to put up a lot of dough this election season. We're going to look at one chunk of it tonight. Welcome to my state of mind. Those of you who are cozy in your dens, ready for the Jets and the Patriots, probably. I almost went. We record late afternoon, so I was thinking tailgating, but no thank you. But that 38-degree rain is the real tough stuff. Not the 65-degree rain, not so bad. Good luck to the Patriots with the Jets, who I predict will upset the Patriots tonight because they have to. Anyway, welcome into my state of mind. I am Dan York. Yes, the question 5 on the ballot is our focus for this evening. It's a $30 million ask spread out amongst some of the jewel arts projects in the state. And some would think, let them go their own. Well, the Yes on 5 coalition is going to tell you why they need your help. So stay tuned for that, and we'll get to it. In the meantime, let's dig into the rundown and figure out what we got going on. Yeah, shucks, right at Rick. The kids are disappointed, understandably, because this focus is going on. Yeah, the president's got to regroup, and he better hurry. We've got some personal endorsements by union leaders who couldn't get their groups to follow suit, I guess. Very strange, very strange. And this endorsement is for one specific reason. I'll tell you exactly what it is. That's what that was last night at Brown. I thought I was back at the federal courthouse, and that is incredible. That's unprecedented, at least for a manager, to ever do what the Royals have done so far en route to the World Series. Let's dig in because we got a lot going on tonight. Yes, as you're well aware by now, the president was scheduled to be here like at this time or a little bit earlier this afternoon, but he blew it up last night. Here's the headline. Yes, the students heartsick over all of this. Little piece from Eyewitness News.
Campus was abuzz Wednesday night with crews setting up, getting ready for the big man on campus. But just after 9 o'clock, the White House announcing President Obama canceling his trip to stay in Washington, D.C. to follow up on Wednesday's cabinet meeting on the government's Ebola response.
We kind of had a feeling that it was going to happen. So it is what it is, but that doesn't make it not upsetting.
Hopefully students aren't too disappointed, but you have to understand what's going on right now in the world. There are more pressing issues, I guess, sometimes. But hopefully he can reschedule and come again sometime in the future. Would be nice.
I am impressed with the sportsmanship and maturity of those Rhode Island College students. I mean, the president coming to your school, that's something that, it's historic for you. It's something you'll never forget. Despite what you think about him, it's a big deal. I bet you he does reschedule, but he's got a lot on his mind. The one thing I did want to remark about is the advance team work for the president to show up at someplace is extensive. So, I mean, it's not like it was 5 minutes of tear up and tear down because the president said, you know what, I'm not going to make it out to Rhode Island today. It's a lot of taxpayer money, too, that goes into the toilet every time he changes his schedule. That's for every president in history. But I will tell you, this president is probably going to have himself on the wrong side of history if he doesn't get going here on this Ebola situation. Now, look, I'm more worried about the psychology of this disease than I am the disease itself because of the kind of media attention that's being brought to it. Here's the headline from today. He cancels his trips around to get focused on this thing. CBS has got a little bit of a piece that they cut last night.
The health officials leading the government's response to Ebola have been called to Capitol Hill to answer questions about containing the deadly virus. The head of the CDC, Dr. Thomas Frieden, says he is confident the procedures already in place will work. In prepared testimony, he says, we have been able to stop every prior Ebola outbreak, and we will stop this one.
The investment we make in helping Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea deal with this problem is an investment in our own public health.
President Obama postponed his travel for a second day to stay at the White House and focus on the response.
You know, the hearing today on Capitol Hill was ugly for the CDC director and for others. A lot of it was on a travel ban possibility, and what they're saying is that, look, you know, this is one way that we keep track of who's coming in here. If we have a travel ban, people use alternative routes throughout the planet in order to be able to get here, and we won't know who they are. I'm still jury out on that, but I know a lot of Americans aren't buying it. I just hope that we understand, Mr. President, that A full focus here is something that the psychology of America needs. Just a couple of thoughts. We lose 30,000 people a year with the flu. We lost 162 people so far with drug overdoses in the state of Rhode Island since the beginning of the year. We've had one loss, Ebola, in Dallas. It doesn't mean that we won't have a couple or 3 or 10 more, and we hope and pray that that's where it stands. But the CDC, that really doesn't have a direct authority over these hospitals that run privately, better get its regulation and oversight act together. This president is on a comeback on a whole bunch of different issues. This one he can't afford to lose. None of us can. Next item. This was nuts. This is just kind of funny. So the headline here is that we've got a couple of union officials who joined the president. He couldn't come here, but he did endorse Gina Raimondo. So the AFL-CIO and the National Education Association of Rhode Island couldn't bring themselves to endorse this woman, Gina Raimondo. This is all because of pension reform. But because they have a lesser of two evils thing going on, or 3 evils or 4 evils or whatever, they decided, George Nee decided, the head of the AFL-CIO, and this guy, Bob Walsh, who is the NEA-RI executive director, decided that they would offer personal endorsements for Gina Raimondo. Now, I don't know what kind of a con game that is supposed to be, but you know, with friends like that, who needs enemies? These two guys are going rogue. Oh, sorry, we don't represent our unions right here. We're just going to offer our personal endorsements because we couldn't bring our unions along. I wouldn't be celebrating, Gina, over that one, and I hope we're not making any deals like Clay Pell and your administration for the National Education Association executive director to do that even lukewarm endorsement for you. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. We'll try to get that answer before Election Day for you. Next item. Yeah, and speaking of endorsements and the AFL-CIO, Catherine Taylor gets hers. The headline here looks like this. This is the first Republican endorsement since the mid-'80s for the AFL-CIO in Rhode Island. Now, Catherine Taylor says all these nice things like, I'm so glad that these unions understand what kind of new wave, new vogue lieutenant governor I'm going to be with all my ideas and all my programs. And why wouldn't she say that? She said it here when I talked to her about it last time. She'll say it next week when she comes here to debate Dan McKee, her opponent. But let's hear the truth. Okay, here's the truth. See that guy? They hate him. They hate him because he's a mayoral academy startup guy. He's a charter school guy. And they hate him for it. There is no other reason for Catherine Taylor to get that endorsement. Truth. Next item. I never saw anything like this in a political debate. I went to Brown myself. Follow my tweets at Dan York Show, Y-O-R-K-E, and you can get some of the play-by-play that I offered last night on this. There was a headline in the Providence Journal today that kind of led you to where I'm going. Cianci question on past corruption. It was a 3-on-1. A 3-on-1. The two candidates, Jorge Elorza and Dan Harrop, and then Roz Chait, the political science professor who was the moderator, who thought for some reason he wanted to be like the historian on Plunderdome. He asked a couple of good questions, and they asked some really weird, irrelevant questions, and anybody who's objectively watching this thing saw that Buddy Cianci was absolutely 3-on-1 last night in front of the Brown students. Oh, well, so what? You know what? A lot of you aren't going to feel sorry for Buddy Cianci, but I will tell you, I've never seen such a lopsided discussion in a mayoral forum. And I don't think that bodes well for Brown. At the end of the day, all the kids that were there, and they enjoyed it, they're not voting anyway. It wasn't broadcast. But I'll tell you, Buddy Cianci bit off a lot here, and he's chewing it. And it doesn't taste so good. Next item. Last item. These guys are unbelievable. You know, from the wild card into the divisional series, right up through the Orioles, close games all. They've won 8 straight playoff games in Kansas City. 8 straight. I mean, there's no way they could win 4 in the World Series, could they? Who knows? Maybe. It's quite the story. Pay attention. All right, when we come back, there's a story to tell about whether we ought to spend $30 million borrowing money to improve our theaters and such. Stay with us. We'll talk about it. Yeah, we got a lot of financial issues that we've got to work out here in election season and on election day. And a lot of you sometimes just kind of mindlessly walk into the voting booth and go, oh, what's this question? And start reading. I'm trying to help you out with that. You know? And yes, you do that, so admit it. Here's the headline right here. 400 million bucks of questions. Now look, $125 million goes to the engineering question. That is question 4. And as I told you, I've supported that. I mean, we've got to keep URI going. This one is an interesting one because the arts in Rhode Island are very, very important. Question 5 is about giving the money to a lot of these wonderful facilities that keep us smiling all year around. And there's a Yes on 5 coalition that is supporting that. And Bert is here from AS220, which is a phenomenal organization. We've highlighted some of the work that they've done here. Welcome, good to see you.
Thank you very much.
And David Beauchesne, the Philharmonic. What's better than a night out at the Philharmonic,
Oh,
right?
thanks, Dan.
No one's going to argue those points, right? But when you're asking,
hope not.
well, you can't. I mean, you simply can't. But when you're asking for $30 million cumulatively for a bunch of facilities, people go, huh, shouldn't they take care of that themselves? So tell me how the Yes on 5 coalition began and what you're thinking.
Well, I mean, I really got to give David a lot of the credit for helping organize all this and put this together and following through. Our organization has been very directly involved. I haven't been as involved as Cynthia in our office, who's been really carrying the ball on this. But I think, one of the comments I would make right away is that our facilities, I mean, often we defer maintenance for the sake of programming. And when you look at the cumulative amount of programming and the amount of young people that we reach and audiences that we reach, frankly, art and culture is one of the biggest assets that we have in this state and this city. And it's time, and this is kind of an unprecedented investment. And I think it's important for the viewer to understand also that this is the way cities and states invest. This is how they do it. They borrow some money and they invest. Some loans, will be retired in the process. So it's not as if we're carrying necessarily more debt. And I don't know the exact statistics on that. I think David can tell you
All right,
that.
so David, do you have a little bit more of the financial structure information here?
And it's also how it got started. Last year, Senate President convened an arts charrette at Fidelity headquarters, actually, with business representatives from the business community, the arts community. Rhode Island Foundation was there, and then leaders from the General Assembly, and also the governor was there. And they brought the question to the arts community. They said, look, the employment in the arts sector grew more than any other sector in the Rhode Island economy during the Great Recession that we just went through. So how can we partner with the arts community to leverage that and to help the arts community grow even more and contribute everything it's capable of contributing to the Rhode Island economy, particularly in terms of jobs and economic development? And we looked at that question pretty carefully, and the answer that we came up with as a collective was invest in our facilities, partner with us to invest in our facilities. We'll bring private money to the table as well, but with state partnership, we can leverage a much greater investment in our facilities, and through those facilities, grow programs, create jobs, better serve Rhode Islanders through the arts.
So the viewer who says, look, I love what they do at these places, but they got to be able to stand on their own.
Right.
The response is?
Well, I think the response is in every state and major city in the country, when you look at the arts infrastructure, not the programming per se, but the infrastructure especially, it's created through public-private partnership.
All right, meaning the theater's got to be high-tech and up-to-date. How you write the play is the story of
Correct.
the theater.
The theater's got to be there, and it's got to have appropriate fire code so that the state doesn't have to shut it down and say people can't come to the play because you don't have the alarms you need, you don't have enough exits. The theaters have to be not only up to date, they have to be safe. All right, where we bring patrons, they have to be safe, and they do have to be up to date. The roofs can't leak. And as Bert said, the artists that run these organizations are going to spend money on the art, and it's easier for the donors to give money to the art. The facilities
And the cash
are
flow
tough.
of these things really isn't to understand, really doesn't go to budget capital improvement. It goes to programming for the most part, the ticket prices and the per event costs for
Our
the
operating
customers
budgets.
to come.
That's right.
You pay through the Philharmonic pays for its wonderful music programming on ticket prices, not on making sure the roof doesn't fall down on the band, right?
Right.
It's not
We pay
band.
for it on ticket prices, and actually 50% of our operating revenue comes from donors.
Right. Jess, put this graphic up for just a second. I want to make sure people understand. And you should go to our website at WPRI.com and take a look at the breakdown where you can find the entire breakdown. We just grabbed a couple of numbers. Trinity Reps looking for 4.6 mil, the Philharmonic 2.3, Newport Performing Arts 4.2, AS220 2.1 million. And there's more in there, cumulative to this $30 million ticket. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about what these places do so you understand exactly what's going on here. And keep you informed. Stay with us. All right, a lot of ground to cover when it comes to question 5. The S on 5 Coalition, some members of that fine group are here. It's your arts community. But I'll tell you one thing, look, we dump on ourselves a lot here in Rhode Island for all sorts of political reasons, but we know we love the water and we love the arts and we love the restaurants, and we've got a cultural advantage to a lot of communities but you're shaking your head, yes.
No, it goes without saying, yeah,
But
absolutely.
sometimes we forget that.
You're absolutely right.
And we got to pay for it. And as a fiscal conservative in a lot of ways, I'm not big on borrowing a lot of dough, but sometimes you got to be able to say step up. First, before we get into it, remind everybody what AS220 does, since you run that joint.
Well, yeah. Well, we have 3 buildings. That's 100,000 square feet of space. That represents actually $25 million of investment in the city that we brought, and multiples of that around us. We have performance spaces, exhibition spaces, a youth program. I mean, it goes on and on. We have our fab labs and print shops and all of these different facilities.
And we've
50
had some of
artists
those
living
folks
there.
here on the show talking about some of the,
Sure.
like the entrepreneurial experimental stuff that goes
That's
on
right.
there, which is really cool.
Yep.
The Philharmonic needs no introduction to
Well,
most folks.
To most folks, although most folks are aware of the orchestra, not a lot of people are aware of our educational work. The bond money on the ballot will actually go to support our Carter Center for Music Education and Performance in East Providence, which is the first center for music education and performance in the state. It houses our music school, the main branch of our music school, and all of our education programs, which serve over 20,000 kids a year.
Really?
That's right. Most people are unaware of that.
Working with the public school system?
Working both with the public school system as well as students who are enrolled privately with us at the music school.
All right, talk to me about how this bond is financed.
Sure. Well, the bond would be financed in the way that all of the state bonds are. It would be floated by the state, and every year the state would have to pay debt service on those bonds. So we estimate on this bond the annual debt service would be about $2.6 million a year.
All right.
But there'd be a return on that investment that we've quantified in terms of the jobs that will be created by these arts organizations and by the construction projects on the facilities, and also the multiplier effect of revitalizing communities through the revitalization of these art spaces. Some of these art spaces are currently not being used that are already named in the bond, and there's a pool of funds for other arts organizations that are not named to apply to, which will undoubtedly create more opportunities in more communities around the state.
I think it's hard for folks who don't pay attention much to the economic trends out there, that the arts industry, if you will, is an economic mover. There's no doubt about that. Inarguable, correct?
Absolutely.
We grew more jobs in our sector during the recent recession than any other sector of the Rhode Island economy in terms of as a percentage. We grew, I think, at 21% through the recession.
During the break, you said you wanted to make a significant point, and what was that? You were talking about new stuff, new programs.
Right. I
new
think, yeah, I think
concepts.
that people also need to understand this isn't just about patching roofs. It's also about some new projects that people are developing. David alluded to a little bit of that. For us, it's sort of bringing our original facility up to where it needs to be physically, but we're also engaged in a new development project that's going to make more affordable housing, expand our labs and our industries, and a very signature gateway project into South Providence that we're working on currently. So I think it's also important to people, which also represents a lot of construction jobs and all of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
If I can make one more point too,
Sure.
Dan, if that's possible, like, you know, we just got picked as the best city to visit in Travel and Leisure magazine.
Yeah.
And if you look at the way they survey for that, so much of the reason why we got chosen is because of the cultural activity that's going on in the state of Rhode Island.
And our
how
historic
we rank,
properties.
And how we ranked on that, and also with the preservation piece. So people need to understand that this really is one of the natural resources of Providence that we need to continue to invest in, that draws a lot of attention to Providence.
And to Rhode Island.
It reminds me of that old phrase.
And to Rhode Island, I'm sorry.
It reminds me of that old phrase, a nice place to visit, but you wouldn't want to live there. And I think you got to be careful to distinguish between the two concepts. You want to live in a place that people want to come visit.
That's right.
The challenges of everyday Providence and the deficits that the city is running and the ongoing debates when it comes to mayoralty and all that kind of thing are related but separate. And I think it's important for people who can't vote in the Providence election specifically to take a little bit of a role in the economic boon of Providence and the arts. And so,
That's right.
again, I may sound like a half a cheerleader for this, but I can't see a reasonable answer for folks to say no on 5 and walk away from that which we can be pretty proud of, right? Final word from you on this?
No, I think it's a big bang for your buck.
Big bang for your buck, David?
I think it's a game changer for the arts. It's a great investment for people to make in jobs in the economy and our arts and culture infrastructure.
All right, well, good luck on that. Keep on. You guys spending money and advocating for this whole thing? You got an ad campaign going?
We've got a tiny amount of money to spend, so we won't have a lot of ads out there.
So you do shows like this to try to convince you?
Yeah,
That's right.
Thank you.
We rely on great people like you.
We'll be right back.
Thanks.
A little cheerleading for that question 5, but listen, the arts are important and they are an economic driver. Your state of mind's important to me and to the viewers, so just let us know what you're thinking. Just send us a voicemail. Just leave us a voicemail at 228-1886. Email, tweet, Facebook post, you know that. Here's a voicemail reaction to the question 3 debate.
Why didn't he make some kind of disclaimer before he interviewed Pablo, the doctor? This guy performs abortions every single day, and I think Dan is just a little too chummy with him. You should let him know that he doesn't agree with what he does for work every single day of his life. Otherwise, I love Dan. All right, bye-bye.
That's about Dr. Pablo Rodriguez, who is here arguing no on the Constitutional Convention. He is a very pro-choice guy and is a doctor who works in the field, no doubt. Not exactly relevant to the argument on the question 3. Anyway, tomorrow night we'll meet a Brown student who loves Providence and wants to tell you why. And I'll see you on the radio at noon on WPRO. Have a great night. Good night.